We're live, buddy.
Alrighty, everybody. My name is Gabby, aka Staten Island, and I've got my cohort here, Blake, also known as Cosmic Charlie, and we're doing a little test today. We want to do some podcasts, and I want to tell some stories. One of the main reasons why I want to record these stories is because as I'm getting older and my memory is starting to fail me a little bit. And I mean, just the sheer amount of time that's passed since some of these things have happened in my life. And, um, I've realized that it would be a great thing to tell these stories, record them, share them on YouTube and other platforms so that these stories will be there, forever. And if not for you guys, I mean, I hope that everyone enjoys the stories that I have to tell, and I hope you guys ask some questions. But probably more than anything, it's for me so that I can remember these stories down the line. Um, One of the things that my friend Francis, aka Not So Dog, mentioned a few times in his podcasts is when a lot of this stuff was happening in our lives, we didn't realize that it was going to be important to people, let alone ourselves, 20, 30 years down the line. And so we didn't take notes. As a matter of fact, back then we were like scared to put anything on paper because it would be evidence of our stuff, what we were doing. So now that we're not living in that time anymore, I thought it'd be a good idea to document, stories of my life.
It's a little
So,
safer that way.
yeah. Um, but this is just a test, and so we're not really starting at the beginning. I told Cosmic Charlie a story yesterday that is one of the amusing ones that I have from my cannabis history, and so he suggested that we share it today as a test. And so here goes. Um, so my first cultivation project, the first thing that I did by myself was I was living in a three-story apartment in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And so we were on the third story of this apartment.
What's the
And
time frame here? What
this
year are
was
we
in
looking at?
this was in 1991.
Ooh,
I
so
think
yeah,
like
super illegal still.
yeah, I mean particularly in New York City. So it was like spring of 1991, I believe, that I moved into that apartment. And I had started a bunch of seeds that were from, bag seed from Kind Bud that I had acquired on Grateful Dead tour. So back then, getting clones like wasn't the thing, like, you know, I only knew one other person at the time that was growing, and I might have been able to get I don't even know if he knew how to clone at the time. We were so new at doing this. But I started a whole bunch of bag seeds. I think I started like 50 seeds, of which half of them approximately were females. And I remember prior to sexing them, I had each container labeled. Every plant was labeled, and I labeled them all girls' names. So we had Michelle, we had Sophie, we had Francine. And Francine was the one that ended up being the keeper out of all of them. It was a plant that I grew for many years. Brought that plant with me to California when I moved to California at the end of 91. Um, and so to tell you how this, I'm just giving a brief story. So being in New York City in a very illegal time, one of the big concerns was how we were going to deal with the waste because we always heard of, the cops looking through people's trash for grow evidence. So, for instance, they might have had a hint or an idea that somebody's growing, but in order to get a warrant, they needed some type of evidence.
Yeah.
And so, it's very common that they dig through trash, find some rock wool or some soil or, some plant matter, and then that's how they would take it to the next level. So, being in New York City, in Brooklyn, um, Just putting your trash out on the street didn't seem like a good idea. It also wasn't a good idea to like bag up all your stuff and put it in a vehicle and try to find a dumpster for it.
Hmm.
So trying to figure this out. Now, before I go too much further into this story, I'm not recommending that anyone do the things that I'm about to say. All right. It was really stupid, but luckily, I'm still here today to tell you the story. So, um, I lived on this third story uh, apartment, and the toilet had a flush that was so violent. Okay, there was so much pressure behind it that like you weren't going to sit on the toilet and flush it because you might get
Was it the equivalent of an airplane toilet? You know how those
an
ones
air,
they don't mess around, you know?
an airplane toilet is nothing in comparison to this. It would have the same sound, but like so much more violent. Okay. I mean, it literally, because there's a lot more water going through it. An airplane toilet, it's like air and, but this was like a lot of water. It was the only term I can use to adequately describe it is violent.
Yeah.
And so one day I get the harebrained scheme that I was going to try to put some soil down the toilet. And I had a 1 gallon pot, crumbled it up a little bit, and I put it in the toilet and it just went boom, straight down. I could not believe it. And it worked so well that I continued doing that for the entire time that I lived in this apartment. And, I was growing in, I believe, 2 or 3 gallon pots. I'd have maybe like 30 at a time. And at the end of every cycle, I would break up the soil a little bit and dump 32 gallon pots down the toilet, you know, maybe one at a time or half at a time and
Yeah.
flush it.
It would handle it.
And it would handle it. It was unbelievable. And, after the soil, I decided, hey, I'm going to grind up the leaves, grind up the stems. Everything went down the toilet. I mean, to this day, I can't believe that all that stuff went down the toilet. And so one day, putting the soil down the toilet, flush it, and it doesn't go down. This is like 6 months in. 6 months, 2 cycles of just flushing all the cannabis trash right down the toilet. And it doesn't go down. And my life is flashing before my eyes right now. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to call a plumber. He's going to come out here with a snake and he's going to snake 6 months worth of growing stuff out of these pipes. And not only is it going to cost me a fortune, but now I'm exposed. Now, like, the plumber, and meanwhile, I still had plants growing. So
Oh yeah.
how am I going to have a plumber come over? This is just the worst nightmare situation that I had, ever had at the time.
It's worse than it happening at a party.
Oh yeah. If it happens at a party, you just sneak out and nobody knows it's you. You just
Yeah,
quickly
just make
you
that
just put
extra real quick, right?
you just quickly make it, hey, this is my place. I've got the lease in it. So I'm like, oh man. So before I call the plumber, I decide I'm gonna walk down the street to a hardware store and grab a plunger. I never needed a plunger before because this toilet was so violent that everything would just go down it. So I get a plunger, 2 pumps with the plunger, flush the toilet, and everything goes down. And like, I just, to this day, I can't believe that I did that. And to this day, I can't believe that after that happened, I continued to flush the stuff down the toilet because I still didn't know what to do with it. I
Well,
figured
you already
that's
had the plunger at that point, so
exactly.
you're set,
I'm wondering what I did was I didn't put quite so much at a time, like I put a little bit less in at a time.
Yeah.
But
Lesson learned.
yeah, but it all just went right down the toilet. And yeah, so that's an example of what like growing in New York City was like in 1991. Um, Extreme paranoia and flushing your waste down the toilet. And so I'm going to skip around a little bit now since this is just a little test in a first story. So in this apartment, it was like it's a building, and it had six apartments, two on the bottom floor, two on the middle floor, and two on the top. And on the bottom floor, it was like a restaurant and a card room. Okay. It's like a small little restaurant and then like a little poker room that these, old Polish guys played cards. Then on the second story, there was like a Polish family. There must have been like 10 people living in this house. Um, and then a gay couple. And then on the top story, it was me, my girlfriend at the time, and in the next apartment right next to us was another young couple, like us, who were, in our 20s. And I never spoke with anyone, because I was scared. You become friends, then, like people want to interact with you more. And
Oh, let's
I,
do dinner. Oh, let's go to your
yeah,
place, something.
no, nothing,
Yeah.
right? So this was late fall of 91, and I'm harvesting my last crop. We're planning on cutting this crop down and moving to California. And so one thing I should start off by saying is to get into the building, you had to get rung in from downstairs, right?
Hmm.
So, nobody's just going to knock on your door. But one day I get and I'm like, oh my God. And so I walk over. This is almost like the toilet thing. It's like, oh my God, my life is flashing before my eyes.
All the choices you've made up until that point. Why have I
Yeah,
done these things?
exactly. And so um, I'm like, hello. And it's a girl's voice on the other line, on the other side of the door. And she's like, hey, I was just wondering if I could get a joint. And, I mean, I should have known, like, you could smell the stuff, like you get to the second story. There was no carbon filters at the time. I don't remember how I was exhausting it, but I know it wasn't going right out or anything.
Hmm.
Um,
And you
so
probably
like,
become nose blind too at a certain point where it's not as potent to you. So you're like, oh yeah, it doesn't
yeah,
smell that bad.
I mean, I could smell it, but they must have been able to smell it way more than I did at the time. So I'm like, all right, she knows. I open up the door and I just pull her in, right? I just like grab her by the arm and pull her in. And this was a railroad apartment. Okay. So it's just like one room into the next room into the next room. And right outside the front door, like there was like a little closet there, and that's where I was drying everything. And so as soon as she walked in, she saw everything.
Yeah.
And I knew she was going to. She already knew. Um, she saw my wheat drying, and like there was the light of the weed growing in the next room, and she was like, oh my God. She's like, I knew you were growing. She's like, I could smell it, but I had no idea it was like this. I had like maybe a 10 by 10 space that I was growing in at the time. And so I showed her the plants, and she was just in complete, like, just blown away. And
Yeah,
she
high
was,
high times wouldn't have anything on that, like how else would a normal person see an operation like that besides just stumbling on something,
yeah.
It's not like you can
So
go to craft marijuana, the Reddit and just look around. That, the internet wasn't like that back then.
even in craft marijuana, all we're seeing is just some flower picks.
Hmm.
So um rarely do we see like an entire garden. And again, this was in 1991. You might see some stuff in high times, but
No,
so
nothing
anyway,
like that. Yeah.
she says to me, she says, well, you know she's blown away. She's like, this is really great. She's like, I'm embarrassed to tell you, like, I have a couple of plants next door. She's like, do you want to see them? And I'm like, oh my God, you're growing.
Bromies.
I had no idea that she was growing in the apartment next door, right? So she takes me over to her apartment and takes me over to the like furthest room, and she has plants on a windowsill to the street. And I can't believe it because the way this apartment works is like you go up the stairs, it zigzags this, like that, right? And when you're down at the street looking up, you can't you couldn't tell whose apartment that was.
Hmm.
Like you would, so like if the police saw her plants over there, if they came into the building and they zigzag up the stairs, their nose is going to lead them to my house, not their place. And she had like 10 plants in a little planter box, it was
Hmm.
like this big, and there were seedlings. And I was like, look, that's never going to amount to anything. You have to destroy that right now. Because I was like, not you're not going to get anything, and like it's bringing heat to me. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. You could see it from the window outside. And so she got rid of her plants. I gave her some weed. And then before I moved to California, I gave her a bunch of grow gear, a bunch of clones, and they continued growing after I left.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and I've never talked to her since, like it was just gave her the stuff and
That's
and,
it.
and, and we left and stuff. But it's just a funny story you know, how things could have really gone wrong,
Hmm.
like I said, if the police saw that, their nose would have brought them directly to my place, not to theirs.
Without a
Or,
doubt.
or, or at least to both,
Yeah.
like if they knew which apartment it was, they still, when they got to the top, they would have.
They'd know that that smell wasn't coming from that apartment. No way from
Exactly.
those little tin plants.
Yeah. So that was my first garden and my first my first experience growing cannabis myself. And it was also the first time I ever um, shared my plants with anybody else, and a little knowledge. I
Yeah.
gave her some tips on like, the plants require darkness and all that. And so
Photosensitive,
yeah.
sensitive. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's the start of your journey of helping people grow.
yeah, it really that was the first time I ever helped anybody grow. So that was just a little story, a lot more to come, but we just wanted to do a little test recording and see how it came out. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you guys send feedback and comments, and I hope you guys laugh at me and laugh with me, and I hope you guys look forward to more of um, these videos and podcasts in the future. Let me know what you want to hear me talk about too.
All right. Let's go ahead and